The 2025 NFL Draft is in the books, which means it's time for grades. We offer up grades for every single one of the Bengals picks and an overall score right now on Locked On Bengals.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jake Liscow. He's James Rapien, and we've been covering the Cincinnati Bengals here on Locked On Bengals since 2016. You can find James writing as well over at BengalsTalk.com. Welcome back to the Everydayers, and if you're not an everydayer and you'd like to make sure you don't miss an episode of Locked On Bengals as we have you covered every day, well, just hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and those episodes will show up in your feed on YouTube as well whenever we drop our episodes. And we've got some post-draft content for you this week. For all the folks out there that make us your first listen, we appreciate you as well. Today, we're going to go through each pick, assign some grades, some meaningless snap post-draft reaction grades that we'll see what happens, right? But as the draft happens every year, the whole industry reacts to the draft based on the things that they know before the draft and assigns a grade. And this is true across the internet, across the football writing landscape, where we have like 20 different writers contributing grades that go into an overall GPA. And it was a great job of putting that together every year by Renee Bugner on Twitter. We'll talk about that a little bit later, James, because we're going to talk about our opinions first today.
Yeah, and by the way, everything every sports fan does is in the moment. There are people that will trash, Joe Burrow's not playing well today in the second quarter, and then Joe Burrow may throw the game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. I don't know why people say, ask me in 3 years with the draft. Everything we do is in the moment. Every single thing. As a society, we have never been more in the moment and reacting in the moment than we are in 2025. So no problem with draft grades. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers have shared their opinions in the moment. Maybe they hate our opinions in the moment. That's fine. It doesn't mean these guys aren't going to be good. No one's saying that. But we can certainly be critical or praise the Bengals for what they did or didn't do. And I guess that's where we should start with the 17th overall pick. We talked about Shamar Stewart and how likely it was. Well, it happened. Where are you at on this pick now that we're a few days removed from it on Thursday night? I know I feel a little differently about it, getting to know Shamar a little bit and chatting with him and doing a little more research and talking to some people across the league. But how do you feel?
Yeah, I don't think that the grade I'm about to say has anything to do with my belief in Shamar Stewart being a hard worker or my belief in Shamar Stewart's character, which those are both through the roof. I have no questions about those things as of today. I expect him to go in there and do everything he can to maximize his talent and be the best player he can in the NFL. I think his athletic traits are special. I think he did not put that together on the field at Texas A&M. Even if the scheme is part of the reason you didn't get that production from Shamar Stewart. I think that the need to improve his finishing ability, the need to improve his pass rush plan and arsenal in terms of moves is still out there. And there's a need to improve his awareness of the football field. He's only 21. There's plenty of time for all those things to happen. And if you wanted to take a bet on traits, players with athletic traits like Shamar Stewart, who, if you're comparing him in your mind right now to Myles Murphy, because it sounds familiar, is more athletic than Myles Murphy and plays with a different demeanor than Myles Murphy did coming out of Clemson. Those are different things. But despite all of that, the risk involved here, based on the production, based on what he did in college, is still the reddest of flags when considering the overall picture of the prospect. It's just a risky pick. There were less risky picks that could have also addressed the pass rush, that could have also addressed positions that, even as I look at the roster today, I would consider needs. But it was tough that Walter Nolan went one pick ahead of Shamar Stewart, because I think that would have been the pick had that not happened. All that said, that summarizes for me to a D plus, I think C minus. That's where I'm at in a range for Shamar Stewart. I can see how this can work out. I can see that this is a player that could come in and be a contributor right away and be a solid player right away. But when you're picking at 17, I think you're just hoping for a little bit more. You're hoping for a better chance of landing a really significant impact player. And there's a chance that Shamar Stewart turns into that. Don't get me wrong. I'm rooting for him to do that. I want him to do that for the Bengals. But there were better coin flips or whatever rolls of the dice in my mind at that pick.
Well, if they really cared about linebacker so much, and I'm going to be really, really critical of round 2, Jahad Campbell's staring at you, and the medicals are the medicals, but there's the risk that's baked in. And so I think it's interesting because the Bengals, they knew the lack of production, of course. And they're like, yeah, it's not as risky. It's not as risky as medicals here. It's not as risky as taking Harmon, who I think a lot of people would have expected them to just take their Harmon and say, oh, well, he's close enough to Walter Nolan. And we need that interior disruptor. And I think when you referred to guys that they could take, I'm not saying those are the only two, but I think those are the big two from a talent standpoint where it's like, man, because if you take Campbell, well, then you're not in on Knight in round 2. And so I totally get that. At the same time, I think he's going to be solid because he's got some, and this has nothing to do with anyone else on the roster, but I think the mentality is different than Miles Murphy. And I think Miles could be really good this year. But like this idea that Shamar Stewart is going to be tentative early on. No, like I think if he was drafted 2 years ago, he would have found his way on the field because he's more versatile and he's stronger and he's more. I just think he's going to be more direct on the field, off the field, all of the above, and they need him. And so I think he's going to contribute right away. I think that this is a solid pick the more and more I think about it. Now, is the risk baked in? Yeah, because what they're saying is we're going to bet on these traits and he's going to become a star. I'm not sure he's going to become a star, but I think his floor is higher. Like, I don't think he's out of the league in 3 years. I think he's someone that, you know, like I think he's someone that is going to be able to help this team this year. I get why your grade is the way it is because it's like, well, Derek Harmon's staring at you. Malachi Starks maybe staring at you. Obviously, Jahad Campbell. So I understand that. At the same time, I get why they did it. I get why they rolled the dice here on a star. I think that's where the risk is. We don't know if he's going to be a star, but he might be. But I also think he could be a guy that plays a ton for you as a rookie. Probably, I really think he starts as a rookie. Like maybe not. Maybe I'm just too bullish on it. But I'm going to give it. We're different here. This is my highest grade of the first 2 days, which is going to give you an idea of where things go. But I'll give it a B+ because I think that I'm not going to penalize them for the risk. I think there were some A's in there. I think Derek Harmon probably gets a B+, A-. Jahad Campbell would have been an A, but I get it. So B+ for me.
I understand the idea. I understand the upside. I understand that he can come in and be a good player right away. And I think those are all great things. I just see it as a significant risk considering the other options. It's an opportunity cost thing, right? Like it's nothing about the player individually. I guess I can't say it's nothing about the player individually. I can understand the player individually. Like I can understand all those things you're saying. And like I believe in his work ethic. And I believe in his athletic traits. I believe in all those things. It's just an opportunity cost thing for the most part there, where I felt like there were better options. Maybe a D+ is too harsh. Maybe it should be a C. But you look at the next few picks, Gray Zabel, I probably give a slightly higher grade to. Ibuka is not in play for the Bengals. Jahdae Barron maybe is a similar grade. I don't really see how he would fit, but Derek Harmon gets a higher grade for me. And so would Malachi Starks. So would Jahad Campbell. Those are the big ones that stand out. You're right. Josh Simmons, maybe even 2, who has the injury flag, but it's just which risk are you
similar?
Which risk are you okay with? And from the outside looking in, we don't know what the injury grades were on some of those guys or the athleticism grades were on some of those guys, right? So if Jahad Campbell's injury grade, medical grade was an F and Shamar Stewart's production grade or whatever I'm not saying they have that necessarily, was a D, and they see them similarly from a traits perspective, well, Shamar Stewart's going to come out higher on the board, hypothetically. So I understand it. It's an opportunity cost thing for me. And there's a knock-on effect, right? There's a domino effect that we start to see, I think, almost immediately in some ways. So let's continue. We'll get into the second round here. Day 2 coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Monarch Money is here for you because, well, let's be honest. You've probably checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app either. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, spending in one place. So you stop managing your money and start building wealth. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. And instead of juggling a bunch of apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
James, let's talk day 2. Demetrius Knight, Dylan Fairchild, the Bengals selections in the second and third rounds. And sounds like things are going to get a little rocky. And anyone that listened to our post day 2 episode, our immediate reaction episode, we were obviously a little bit frustrated with the way that day went at the time. And maybe the frustration, acuteness has worn off at this point, but much of the analysis remains.
Yeah. No, the frustration's still there. By the way, this is the perfect example. Like, I think Demetrius Knight is going to be a good player. And so if you're not an everydayer, you're someone that's just swoops in for the draft and swoops out. Well, the Bengals got a good player at 49. I believe that. I think he's going to start for Jermaine Pratt. Maybe by the time you see this, Jermaine Pratt's released. Would not shock me. Like, I think that's coming soon. But this pick gets a D for me. And it gets a D for me because they could have had one of the top guards in the draft. We've spent years talking about guard. Not like 6 months, not 2 months, years. The amount of times Tate Ratledge was mocked to the Bengals during these mock draft simulators had to be insane. Probably one of the most popular mocked players to the Cincinnati Bengals. And it was because it would allow them to dress the defense in round 1, but still protect Joe in round 2. And so when you're talking about probably a top 3 guard in this class falling to you, and he's purely a guard. Remember all the scary thoughts for people transitioning an offensive tackle to guard, and you have to do that in this class because there's not many pure guards, and boom, they had one, and it landed in their lap, and they didn't take him when, and here's the part that's important, because I could totally see people saying, James, the Bengals know more than you. Fine, but they also love Tate Ratledge. They were willing to pick Tate Ratledge. He was in play at 49. And so the tiebreaker would have been, oh, well, we need this linebacker. I hate it. If linebacker was that big of a need and they viewed it as that big of a need, well, damn it, they should have addressed it in March. It should have been addressed so they didn't have to force a pick. So now it completely creates the snowball effect where they don't get the best player at 49 because they're forcing a need. And then they need a guard, so they don't get the best player at 81 and they're forcing a need. Day 2, it's so wild because day 2 was a disaster for the Bengals. And at the same time, they probably added 2 starters. And I know that's wild and that feels contradictory for a lot of people, but that's exactly what happened. And so it's not like they did an awful job at picking Dylan Fairchild. Like, I get it, when you need a guard, that makes sense. But had they just taken the best player available, the truly best player available, and not forced the need at 49, then they would have addressed the guard spot. And then they probably have a different defensive player in round 3. Or maybe Demetrius Knight Jr. is there in round 3. And so that's where this comes from. It is frustrating. It still is. And that doesn't mean Demetrius Knight Jr. isn't going to be the easiest guy to root for. Met him on Saturday, and it was awesome. And I think he's going to be a fan favorite, and I think he's going to contribute. I still give this pick a D.
Yeah, I think again, Guy is awesome, can see the fit, can see the role, but it's an opportunity cost thing again. It's you could have done this other thing. with this pick. And maybe you could have even gotten Demetrius Knight in the third round. Maybe not. Maybe you would have had to have waited like many other teams did. There were 2 linebackers drafted on day 2. Demetrius Knight and Nick Martin, one of the linebackers that we mocked to the Bengals at some point in like the 6th round.
Yeah.
Because that's where his consensus was. That was a worse pick, but it's an opportunity cost thing. You go a different direction in the 1st round, take your pick. Then there's an opportunity here to take a Nick Skirton or an Ashton Gelati who goes later in that round, or a Landon Jackson, who is a guy that, as a 2nd round edge with a lot of athletic tools, with the high floors of run defender, is a guy that could have made sense here. But it's this knock-on effect. They go edge in the 1st round, so obviously you're not going edge in the 2nd round. If you're not going edge in the 2nd round, with the way the roster stands, you're thinking about defensive tackles, you're thinking about defensive backs, you're thinking about guards. Very notably guards. Tate Ratledge, obviously, very close to being the pick here, but no one else took Demetrius Knight. And the way that their board was stacked at this point, that causes them to skew to Demetrius Knight. And the thing that gets me about it, as we've talked about time and time again, is they decided when Demetrius Knight ends up ahead in their priority list of Tate Ratledge, that they were more okay with risking the gap at guard than risking the gap at linebacker. And we also know that they had a very high grade on Barrett Carter. So when you consider that Barrett Carter is a guy they really liked and got later, which is great. But there was no other guard that they really liked for this pick. Did they think Barrett Carter wasn't going to be available to them later? Obviously, because if they thought they could get Barrett Carter later and they thought that he was close, and I know that they have different roles and they're different players. Al Golden was very clear about that. Then why not go the guard route here and come back and get your linebacker later or earlier?
Yeah.
Either of those things.
Yeah. Did you give a grade?
I did not. I am probably the same grade here, a D plus, a C minus. Like, I'm kind of there for both guys because in a vacuum, you can see the role. You can see that they can be starters on day 1, but it's an opportunity cost issue.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think it's really hard for me to imagine a world where Tate Ratledge, who they liked, it's not like there was a medical red flag or they just were out on him. You look at all the consensus stuff, and that matters. NFL teams had Tate Ratledge higher than Demetrius Knight. Just did. And the fact that they were considering Barrett Carter as well, and then they take him in the 4th, that shows you that they viewed the need. That's what I mean by need-based. I'm not saying that their board didn't have Knight above Ratledge, but that's very with need baked in to like the nth degree, clearly. And I hate it. And so Demetrius has nothing to do with you. If any of your family's watching or anything like that, because that really does happen a lot. I want to make it very clear. I think he's going to be a good player. I think that when you're drafting and you're looking at this, protecting Joe Burrow with the top 3 guard in the draft would have been awesome. An awesome get here, especially because as we go into round 3, well, some other guys were there, and instead they had to go guard. And so let's do that. Let's get into round 3. We'll pick things up. We'll start to grade a little faster here, where Jake has C- / D+ on both guys. I have B+ and D. Will it get better? Will it get worse? We'll do grades for picks 3 through 6 coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. And did you see Anthony Edwards? He's got LeBron and the Lakers on the ropes. Will Luka Doncic and LeBron James be able to figure it out? I'm not sure they will. But whether you think Luka's going to or not, you got to get to FanDuel right now, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. It's that simple. You go to FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet. You can put it on the Reds, on the NBA playoffs, anything you could think of. And boom, once you win that bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets. And after the game tips off, you can combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. NBA, you know it. No game is over. Comebacks happen all the time. So don't miss your chance to get $250 in bonus bets by going to FanDuel.com.
Dylan Fairchild, the Bengals pick in the 3rd round. Hard to hate on the pick. there maybe was another guard you preferred here. I'm sure there are those of you out there that have watched a ton of offensive linemen and you were maybe thinking Wyatt Milam or the LSU Miles Frazier guard would have been picks to consider here. Those guys go a little bit later. But Dylan Fairchild, a guy with a great pass protection profile, as we discussed, didn't test athletically. That's the biggest hole in his profile. But this is a player that to me speaks to, okay, here's your Scott Peters referendum. Here's a player that Scott Peters identified as a guy that he really liked from a foundational perspective, that he thinks that he can get up to speed from a technique perspective. And if Dylan Fairchild isn't starting at left guard right away, I'd be a little surprised. We also think, based on what we know, that this was not a BPA pick, that the Bengals here decided we cannot wait longer for a guard. We need to pick the top guard on our board and bypass another player that maybe we had graded around better.
Yep. This is why this pick is a C for me. And I like Dylan Fairchild. I think he's going to start. I think he's going to protect Joe Burrow. I love his makeup. I love that he's a former wrestler. I love that he locked up with Scott Peters during the pre-draft process. And Scott Peters is obviously just by the way, walked through the Bengals locker room the other day. Freak. Like, that dude's a freak. You want to talk about a guy that could beat up most of that locker room? It's the offensive line coach. I'm not messing with them. But anyways, Fairchild loved that. Back-to-back state champion wrestlers like, yeah, I thought we were going to get after it a little bit. Like, that's awesome. Like, I like that. That's the mentality you need. He comes from Georgia. He's someone that I think is, and I know he didn't test, I think he's going to move pretty fine for what they need, for what they want. And he's a pass protector. He protects. So like, I like everything about it. But there's two things here. Either if the Bengals really love Dylan Fairchild, could you imagine if they had just gotten the Georgia boys and Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild are your guards? Like, those both guys are starting now. So let's just say they do that and they take Tate. Okay. Or they stick to what we believe is their board and think we're pretty locked in on this. You could have had Tate Ratledge and then Kevin Winston Jr. And then you still get Barrett Carter. So you still would have addressed linebacker. You really liked Kevin Winston Jr. You were in on him at 49. He fell to pick 81, goes I think the very next pick to the Titans or 2 picks later to the Titans. And you could have done that. And instead they forced the linebacker. And it's just, what's more valuable? Clearly they feel linebacker is. And I just go back to it. It's like, man, you forced a need because you didn't address the need that you were really worried about in free agency. And that's where it comes back to. They set themselves up for this. Doesn't mean I don't like Demetrius. Doesn't mean I don't like Dylan. But that's where things are at. And you could kind of say that same thing about round one, really, if you want to talk about the uncertainty around Trey from an edge standpoint. So it's tough. It's tough when you draft this way. The good news is I do think Dylan Fairchild's going to be a good player. So that's the good news. The bad news is it's, yeah, he should be. The bad news is it's like, you could have went this route. And would it shock you if, let's just use Kevin Winston Jr. Would it shock you if Kevin Winston Jr. is better than Demetrius Knight Jr. in 2 years? Shouldn't shock anyone. So that's what's tough.
The whole issue with the first 3 picks of the draft is an opportunity cost thing. And it goes back to how they set themselves up for the draft, the pressures they felt at different positions. And the big thing that we haven't really talked about yet today that we talked about at the time was the picks before and after the Bengals' second-round pick were traded. And that felt like an opportunity for the Bengals to trade out of that pick, add a pick, because part of the reason their overall draft grade is seen across the internet by all of the various NFL writers out there as the worst on average in this draft class is because they only had 6 picks. They can only add so much talent. And when some of those picks were used on players seen as consensus reaches, that is why those grades are going to look that way. That's part of the equation here. Could they have traded back and added a pick in the second round and then still gotten the guys they got if that is the direction they wanted to go? Dylan Fairchild, though, for me, it's hard for me to go lower than a C. I'm definitely not. I think it's like a solid C plus from a scheme fit perspective, but taking everything as a collective in the first 2 days, it's hard to me to see that as anything other than a D. Like for the premium picks of the draft, I really like their day 3. I have less issues with the day 3 picks. That's where we're going to finish. But
Day
the
2 was
first
rough, man.
the
And I
first
get it
2
if you
days,
feel that way about round 1 too. Yeah.
it's just an opportunity cost issue. Like if you play the if game, and it's very easy in retrospect. But if you say Jahad Campbell, Tate Ratledge, Kevin Winston as a
Whew,
combination of players, or
whew.
Jahad Campbell, Landon Jackson, Dylan Fairchild, if they really wanted to get a linebacker, right? And they really wanted to get an edge. There are different combinations of picks where, based on consensus and what we thought pre-draft, we probably would have liked it a little bit better. And so their needs, I think, painted them into a corner a little bit. That the pressures they felt to address certain positions pushed them in a
Free
direction.
agency. Yeah. It's why we talked about free agency, because you can't do this to yourself and only have 6 picks. Everyone knew it was a weak linebacker draft on the first 2 days. And whenever they realized that, hey, Jahad Campbell's not going to be in the mix at 17. Well, we all kind of knew Carson Schlesinger wasn't going to be there at 49. And so was this them saying, oh, well, we have Demetrius Knight ahead of Schlesinger anyway, and he's our second-ranked linebacker? Or is this them really skewing the grades to make sure that they get a guy that they needed? And I think it's the latter, because no one, and he's awesome. Again, you're not knocking the human, but he's 25 in July. He's a 1-year full-time starter at linebacker and going to help, but felt forced. And it has a snowball effect, especially when you only have 6 picks and the margin for error. Like they didn't even trade down. That's the other part of it I forgot to mention. Like if you trade down in round 2,
about that. I just talked a lot about that. So let's go to day 3 here. Barrett Carter. I just talked a lot about the trade down idea.
No, I know, but
I cut you off.
No, I'm saying that they didn't even trade down, and then for Fairchild they could have traded down. Like
Sure.
I don't think that was that out of the realm to do. And so to not, I know they tried in round 1, but round 2, I'm not even sure that was really, I mean, I'm sure they're open to it, but I'm not sure that they were as open to doing it then, put it that way.
The trade ahead of the Bengals and the trade 2 picks, or the pick before the Bengals pick, 2 pick after the Bengals in the second round were traded. There were a lot of trades after that in the second round.
But even in the third, I bet you could have moved down 8 spots and got Dylan Fairchild. Like that wouldn't have been crazy to think.
So. I care much less at that point.
Sure.
Because you're getting like
you're not getting as much either.
Pick instead of maybe a 4th round pick. The Bengals had Barrett Carter in the 4th round.
Yep.
It's the second linebacker, which is the only issue that you could take with this is double dipping on linebacker right away. But they clearly very much felt that they needed a linebacker, and it's hard to take issue with the value here. It's not a crazy reach by any stretch of the imagination. They have a clear idea for the plan for Barrett Carter. This was just a B for me, James. I have no issue with Barrett Carter in the 4th round. Not really. It's only knocked really because of going back to linebacker again. They had 2 double dips, but going back to linebacker again with the various holes on the roster, like when we take a look at this depth chart, we talk about how the outlook has changed or not changed for certain positions after the draft.
Sure.
We will have some not changed outlooks that we were expecting to have changed outlooks for, partially because you're going 2 linebackers here.
Yeah, I give this a B as well. I think it's solid. It's stuck to their board. We know he was probably the top player on their board. Ty Robinson was gone. Guys, I think that were in the mix were gone. I think there might have been a running back or 2 that they would have considered here. And those guys were gone early day 3. And so no knock. And that's why sticking with your board and in having an unbiased, not need-based board is so key going into the draft, because you still got a linebacker. You're still able to do it. And if it was such a huge void, I don't think anyone would have said linebacker is a bigger need than guard coming into the draft. Well, the Bengals told you they felt like it was. And so that's why. But no, I think Barrett Carter is a solid B. I think he's going to contribute. I think Darren Simmons is going to love him. Think about how Akeem Davis-Gaither was used a bit early on. And they are pretty solid now, I would say, at linebacker. You added Burks in free agency. You get Knight, and then you get Carter. I get why they did it here. Round 5, favorite pick. You want to talk about scheme fit? I think Jalen Rivers is going to fit because they wanted a swing tackle. They wanted someone, that they felt like could play multiple spots. He may end up competing to start at guard, but has the size, 319, 6'6", length, 35-inch arms, and can use them. Like Deontay Smith had the length. I'm not sure he knew what to do with it. Jalen Rivers can, and a really quality pass protector. So, like, I really like what they did on the offensive line room because I think both guys should be able to help right away, even if Rivers isn't starting. But this is my best value in their best value. And so this is an A+ for me. I think it checks every box you would want in the 5th round. And I love the double dip on the offensive line. So A+ for this one.
Yeah, there's no player going later that I'm really excited for that went between the Bengals 5th and 6th round picks that I'm like, oh, they obviously should have done this instead. A for me. Hard for me to go A+ in the 5th round. Like, I feel like 5th round A+ would be a guy that, like DJ Giddens maybe could have been an A+, but he went 2 picks earlier. Like a guy that I expected to be gone multiple rounds ago. I think to get
I
the
wonder if
plus.
they would have taken Giddens too. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm curious because he went way later than I expected. Like there had to have been something that pushed him down.
Yeah, and
he
they
goes
were
in
in
the
on
fifth.
running 3, like before round 6. So yeah, I do wonder that. But yeah, I get that. We're splitting hairs. Fun.
Yeah,
pick.
it's just really hard to get to a plus on day 3 for me.
It's my favorite pick. A+,
I agree.
baby.
I'm going to come back with another A though. Taj Brooks in the 6th. Get a running back that has great production. I can see a very clear role for as a short yardage back. Come back there on in the 6th round. I like the late running back swings. I liked it when they did it with Chase Brown, who was a better graded prospect overall. But I like the 6th round, 5th round, day 3 swings at running backs with Taj Brooks.
Yeah,
no issues there. Give it an A.
Yeah, you've given more A's than I have. B+ for Taj Brooks. No real knock. I think it's a really above average pick at this stage. I certainly think he's going to potentially be the 3rd down back. Like I think he's got that kind of potential early on in his career. He's quality pass protector, someone that can catch out of the backfield, and at worst case can be your short yardage back. Might be the hardest to tackle in that running back room. So just from a pure power standpoint. So yeah, love the swing. B+ from me. What's your overall grade? Did you sum it up and give an overall grade?
I've not done that yet. I think the other players that you could have considered in the 6th round that if you really wanted to split hairs, Antoine Powell-Ryland, Aeneas Peebles, if you wanted to take some swings at this point in the draft, I think those are fine. Maybe you prefer a different running back there. Maybe you want Damian Martinez, who goes, again, way later than expected.
Yeah,
maybe you want Rashard Smith, who I'm not sure I really see the fit for there. Maybe you want a safety at this point, RJ Mickens. I don't know. But yeah, I have no problem with Taj Brooks. Overall, though, I think you wait the first couple days heavier. So even though I really like day 3, I think it comes out to a C- for me overall. I think that I can see how the players can contribute. I think when we look at the overall roster and try to figure out have they gotten better through the offseason, we're still going to have some pretty serious questions at a lot of the same spots we've been talking about for a few months. And I like the value on day 3. If there's one thing they've done consistently well lately, I've liked some of the day 3 work in the draft, and they didn't set any picks on fire. I think that also helps. There's nothing where it's like, wow, they drafted a guy that really shouldn't have been drafted in the 2nd round or something like that. You know, there's nothing like that. I can see how all these players can be longtime NFL players at the very least, and so it's hard to kill them too much. But if I'm saying C is average, I'm saying it's a slightly below average draft class.
Yeah, it was very safe. I feel like they went very safe. Like all these guys you look at and you're like, oh, well, he's going to be productive somewhere. I don't know how good he's going to be, if he's going to be a star. I'm not sure if they got a star in this draft, and I think that would knock him a little bit too. C+ for me. So right at average. I give the plus because I do think that they nailed day 3. I mean, you get 2. Like if you would have told me they get 2 guys that can pass protect at a high level right away, well, that's the first thing you're thinking of with a rookie. So that's huge for me, for them to be able to do that and find that, even though day 2 was really and I get what I'm saying because Fairchild's part of day 2. Day 2 really messed with me because it could have been better, but I don't think it was the worst draft in the league like some. So I'll give them a C+.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's necessarily the worst draft in the league, but on average, that's where it landed. Maybe we'll have more time to talk about that in our next show. We're also, I think, this week going to take a look at the roster, the way that it is set now after the draft, talk about where they got better, who's on the roster, whose opportunities are now the same as they were before, where we thought maybe there were going to be some positions where there would be some more challenges. And we'll have an idea of what this roster will look like now, as they signed reportedly a bunch of undrafted free agents we're going to have to get to as well. And that's largely what the roster is going to look like going into training camp. We'll also talk about whether we expect any veteran moves to come along at this point. So more to talk about as we reset on the Bengals roster here post offseason. For the most part, still veterans they can sign, but free agency in the rearview mirror, the draft in the rearview mirror, and offseason program coming up next. All that on this week's Locked On Bengals episodes. Until then, thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.